guys, welcome to another episode of Spectator Sports. I'm your host Sebastian Fonseca, and we have a loaded show for you guys today. There's been a lot going on. We just wrapped up with the Champions League quarterfinals, and we are in the midst of the NBA play-in tournament, and we're going to preview the NBA playoffs as well moving forward that start this Saturday. So got an action-packed episode for you guys today. To start, the UCL action just concluded on Wednesday, and we now know our 4 semifinalists for the 2022 UEFA Champions League trophy. We have Liverpool facing Villarreal and Manchester City playing Real Madrid, and we're going to dissect and detail how exactly those teams got to the semifinals. So for Tuesday's action, I would say was the better day of games for the quarterfinals. There was Villarreal playing Bayern Munich, and they were already up 1-0 on aggregate on their home leg, and now they were playing in Munich. And we really thought that Bayern, with all that firepower with guys like Robert Lewandowski, one of the best goal-scoring machines in all of Europe, would be able to handle business and be able to move on to set up probably a matchup with Liverpool. However, they just never were able to get going offensively. They had shots galore, but they just could not find the back of the net. They did have an equalizer about halfway through the match, and you thought this is going to send the match into extra time at least, but at the death, and I'm talking about it like the 88th minute, Villarreal was able to come forth with the game winner, and they held on through stoppage time, and now they booked a place in the Champions League semifinals. So this tournament just brings on so many roller coasters of emotion, and that's what I love about the Champions League. And moving on to the Chelsea-Real Madrid matchup, this time it was at the Bernabeu in Real Madrid's home stadium in Madrid, Spain. This was probably the best matchup or best second leg match that we had for the quarterfinals. Chelsea was coming into Madrid down 3-1 on aggregate, and they needed to start early, and they did. Mason Mount started off with a 15-minute goal to cut the deficit to 2-3 on aggregate, and then the comeback was there. At halftime, they still managed to come out strong, and they got a quick equalizer to tie the score on aggregate from Antonio Rudiger off a corner kick. And after that, Timo Werner, out of all people, was the guy to put the team up 4-3 with about 15 minutes to go. And me thinking, at that point, Chelsea has it. Real is on their back foot, and it's just not looking good for Real. They're bleeding. They're out. They looked out of sorts. They looked confused. And just when you thought it was safe to really book their slot to the semifinals, they had Rodrigo come off the bench and it was one of the most beautiful setups you'll ever see. And this is from Luka Modric, Real's star midfielder that still has plenty left in the tank. And he set up a beautiful cross, and it was punched home by Rodrigo to equalize it, and this sent the game into extra time. The momentum was back with Real, and once again, the danger man, Karim Benzema, was able to put them in front this time, and this made the score 5-4 in aggregate at the 96th minute. And Vinicius has been doing his classic runs on the left wing, setting up crosses to guys like Karim Benzema, and this time he was able to really head it home pretty simply right into the back of the net, close to the left post. And Chelsea had some kind of half chances, some opportunities. They possessed the ball. They dominated possession once again in the second leg and in extra time, but just couldn't find the back of the net to send this game to penalty kicks. And I think that would have been truly one of the more epic matchups that we see. And we still have yet to see a penalty kick shootout in the Champions League for a few years now, I gotta say. I have to look back at it. It's definitely been quite some time. But yeah, Real is moving on, and Chelsea is left as the defending champs being knocked out of the tournament. And considering the circumstance, they played one hell of a game. They fought back from a 2-goal deficit, even to take the lead, even briefly. But credit to Real, they one man was able to equal the Chelsea's goal scoring output by himself. Benzema just seems like a man on a mission. It's crazy to think that Real had him and guys like Gareth Bale on the bench, but on top of Cristiano Ronaldo at one point, the goal scoring output there is just unreal. And it makes sense about their earlier Champions League dominance from a run of 2016 to 2018 when they had a three-peat. So this could be their first UCL final appearance in about 4 years, but obviously Manchester City will have something to say about that. And speaking of Manchester City, they were playing the other team in Madrid known as Atletico Madrid, and they played a very good defensive game plan. Atletico, I believe, only had 2 shots over both legs, which is very great defensive stat. They do have a lot of players that are at their disposal for Atleti, but they just could not get the space to really get an adequate shot, let alone a shot on target. And that one De Bruyne goal from the first leg was enough to propel them to the semifinals to set up a matchup with Real Madrid. So that is definitely the more exciting of the 2 matchups, I'd say. Liverpool was already up 2-0 on aggregate to Benfica. Benfica put up a fight, but coming down from 2 goals was just simply too much. But I respect Benfica for getting this far and being able to really show out, especially at the Anfield. That's not an easy place to play in, and they did hold their own. If they were only able to replicate that in the first leg, we might be having a different discussion. But we have 2 clubs from England, and we have 2 clubs from Spain in the UEFA League semifinals. So it's very possible to have a all-Spanish or all-England matchup for the finals. So moving on to the NBA, we're in the middle of the play-in tournament at the time of this recording. And so far, we had the Tuesday action where we had the 7-8 matchups for both conferences play out. Brooklyn was able to handle their business against the Cavaliers. They started off very strong, very early. Kyrie Irving had a great game, and Kevin Durant started off a very good third quarter and was able to seal the deal after fending off a pretty good Cavalier comeback. Darius Garland had another good game against the Nets, but this time again, they did not have the matchup or the output that they wanted. So they're going to be settling for an 8-9 matchup against the Atlanta Hawks moving forward. And with Brooklyn's win, they'll be heading to Boston on Sunday to our matchup against the Boston Celtics. And for the Western Conference matchup, we had the T-Wolves host the Los Angeles Clippers, and it was a pretty back and forth affair. I didn't think that it would be this close. I thought the T-Wolves had home court and they've been playing with more cohesiveness as well, but I think what really kept this game close for the Clippers was that Karl Anthony Towns was just simply not on the floor. When he was inefficient. He finished 3 of 11. He also fouled out. So with that, he didn't really have a lot of fingerprints on this game, but Anthony Edwards did. He played great, to be honest. I would say he definitely carried the team. D'Angelo Russell had some good contributions as well, and another contribution I gotta say has been Patrick Beverley, and he held his own. Patrick is never going to show up in the stat sheet with a lot of numbers or gaudy numbers, but you see on the court that he provides a pest level of irritants to definitely a lot of the opposing players for sure. He just knows how to really get up underneath them defensively. He plays aggressively. He taunts them. He talks trash. He's just that pest. And for a guy so small, he just handles his own so well. And people were talking about how they were kind of gloating or showboating at the end of the game, like, oh, you're just a 7 seed, why are you celebrating? I feel like, it's fine, that the city of Minneapolis has obviously been through a lot within the last couple of years, and they deserve to celebrate something. And I think the Timberwolves doing this and holding off and actually booking a place in the NBA playoffs is going to do a great deal of good for the city of Minneapolis. And I'm generally happy for that team. They've been through a lot, and they're going to set up a pretty nice matchup with the Memphis Grizzlies. To recap Wednesday's action, these were the 9-10 matchups for both conferences, and this was to set up a matchup against the loser of the 7-8 matchups. In the East, we had the Charlotte Hornets taking on the Atlanta Hawks, two division rivals from the Southeast Division. They have a lot of familiarity with each other, and the game was fairly close, I'd say, at halftime. However, the Hawks were able to pull away in the third. Trae Young was more like a facilitator type of role in the first half, getting his teammates involved, getting them cooking, and then he did his own cooking in the third quarter, and that really created the gap that the Hawks never really looked back from. And the Hornets again are eliminated in the play-in tournament. This happened to the same team last year. They were also routed by the 9th seed, that time being the Indiana Pacers last year. So they've gotten close to postseason play, but just haven't made that jump necessarily to actually getting into the postseason. So they definitely do have some great pieces. LaMelo Ball is only going to get better. He just made the All-Star team for the first time in his career. So good things are going to come in Charlotte. Just be patient. They're working on something there. And in the Western Conference, the New Orleans Pelicans hosted the San Antonio Spurs. I would say it was early on, it was pretty much Spurs within the first 4 or 5 minutes of the game. After a quick timeout, though, the Pelicans seized control. McCollum put up more than 20 points by halftime, which was already really doing a lot of damage against the Spurs. And that was a lead that they never really looked back from. Within the waning minutes of the fourth, they did cut it to single digits, but Brandon Ingram was able to put a couple baskets in and give them a lead that provided enough cushion for them to close it out. So New Orleans is moving on, and they're setting up a matchup against the Los Angeles Clippers to play the top-seeded Phoenix Suns. And at the time of this recording, like I said, the 8-9 matchups are still yet to be played, but we're going to preview that and then give a more detailed preview of all the postseason matchups. With the 8-9 matchup in the Eastern Conference, we have the Atlanta Hawks traveling to Cleveland to play the Cavaliers. And in the season series, the Hawks actually won the season series 3-1. Trae Young averaged more than 30 points in the matchups. So I would say in the one-off kind of games, you kind of look at which team has the best individual player, and that's the Hawks. They have a very stud talent in Trae Young. He's a guaranteed 27 points and 10 plus assists, and he can pull up from about 30 feet with no problem. And he's a master of getting to the line. Last year, of course, he did kind of mimic kind of James Harden type of moves and manipulating the referees into calling fouls and getting to the line a lot easier, but he's still a very talented shooter. So I would say, given that and the surrounding cast the Hawks have, they also have some more postseason experience than this younger Cavalier team. It's not to say that they're a bad team. The Cavaliers had a lot of good pieces. They just had some injuries hit them up, and that's the reason why they're in the play-in tournament to begin with. But even if they do get eliminated in the play-in tournament, it's nothing to be disappointed with necessarily. They're still moving in the right direction, and there's going to be more good things to come. They have Darius Garland and Evan Mobley, who's could be the rookie of the year actually. So plenty of good pieces. K-Love seems to be still providing a lot of perimeter shooting, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down in the slightest way in that six-man type of role. In the Western Conference, the Los Angeles Clippers are going to be hosting the 9-seeded New Orleans Pelicans, and this is a very tricky matchup, I'd say. I would lean picking the Clippers just because they have a lot more pieces. They have Paul George, who's really come back into form since coming back from that elbow injury. They have Reggie Jackson, who's been consistent for them, a good solid supporting cast of players. Not to say that New Orleans doesn't either. McCollum has been leading the charge ever since being traded to the Pelicans from the Portland Trailblazers at the deadline. But given that, it kind of again comes down to experience. Pelicans really don't have a lot of players that have that kind of win or go home experience. So I would say I would be picking the Los Angeles Clippers to move on and book a spot against the Phoenix Suns. And now that I made those projections, at least in the play-in tournament, we're going to dissect the NBA playoff picture. To start off, Saturday's action is going to be starting off with the Utah Jazz taking on the Dallas Mavericks. And earlier, I just talked about in the previous episode about the Utah Jazz's latest mishaps and how there's some beef between Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. And the way that they've been playing recently hasn't been the most convincing team, and especially against a Mavericks team like this, I would say that they would be probably looking at a first-round exit. But in the last game of the regular season, unfortunately, Luka Doncic sustained a calf strain. And according to reports, he was seen in a walking boot, and it's not really looking good for him to play in the opening game, let alone the first two games in Dallas. We all remember in 2019 with Kevin Durant suffering a similar calf strain and later coming back, and probably too soon, and he ruptured his Achilles. The Mavericks have a really important decision to make here, albeit, yes, the Mavericks maybe have a possibility of getting through the second round for the first time since they made their championship run in 2011. But you got to think about the long term here. Would you want to put a guy like Luka Doncic at risk of maybe making that calf strain even worse for what? Just getting past the second round, and then you're gonna play the Phoenix Suns, who have been the best team in basketball. So it seems he's not going to play at least in the first two games, and if they do go down 0-2, I would just not even bring him back, unfortunately. It's just so sad to see that he was definitely primed and gearing up for probably a pretty decent postseason run. I definitely had them beating the Utah Jazz with a healthy Luka Doncic and possibly pushing a team like Phoenix to at least 7 games. But without him, the Mavericks are absolutely done, and I would actually see the Utah Jazz handling that quite comfortably. Out of respect, I would say that they would win in 5 games, but as a road team, that's a pretty impressive feat. The Grizzlies are going to be hosting the Minnesota Timberwolves in a 2-7 matchup, and earlier in the episode we talked about the Timberwolves kind of coming off a big high with that play-in game against the Clippers, and they're going to be playing Ja Morant's Memphis Grizzlies. Ja has only made 1 appearance in about a month of play. He's sustained a few injuries throughout the season with knee, foot injuries, and you are definitely got to be kind of worried about his health for the postseason. But the doctors say that he's good to go. He just had a little tune-up game on last Saturday, and he seemed fine. So he's gotten rest. The supporting cast has been playing great, though, in his absence. They've compiled a 20-2 record in the games that Ja has missed, and I gotta say that's impressive. Memphis has a lot of good pieces. They're such a young team. I believe their average of the players' ages, the age of the roster is about 24 years, which is NBA babies, to be honest. A lot of players that barely have maybe 4 years of experience. I think Steven Adams is the most veteran player on the team, and he's definitely been a good presence for the Grizzlies. To give a prediction for that matchup, though, I would say the Grizzlies would be able to win it in 5 games. They just seem to have too much talent, too much supporting cast, even if Ja is not 100%. It's been a nice story, but I just don't see the Timberwolves really providing much of a fight against the Memphis Grizzlies. So I have the Memphis Grizzlies moving on in 5 games. The next game on Saturday will be the Sixers and Raptors. And we talked about this in a little bit in the previous episode, how Nick Nurse poses a lot of issues for the Sixers, especially with Joel Embiid. You remember in the game in 2019, they actually held Joel Embiid to 0 points, and that's including free throw attempts, field goal attempts. He scored 0 points against the Toronto Raptors. He's obviously a much different player than he was back then. He's improved so much on his jump shot, just taking better looks at the basket. He's been staying healthier, I must say. This has been the healthiest season he's had in his pro career. Provided a lot on the defensive end. He's definitely up there with one of the best bigs in the league. But the Sixers still concern me with the supporting cast. James Harden has been taking a lot of heat recently with his play since the trade. Initially, he came on and they looked great. I believe they started 3-0, but since then they haven't been really keeping up the same type of magic. James hasn't had that same quick first step that he kind of relies on. He's been relying on his ball handling, and his fitness has not been the same. He showed up to training camp at the time with Brooklyn, and it was appalling how out of shape he was and how big he looked. His play has not been the same as what he was in when he played for Houston. Obviously, he's playing in a more facilitator type of role. He's providing assists, getting a lot of guys involved, and still getting to the line. But he is not shooting the ball efficiently at all. And even in Houston, he wasn't shooting the ball the most efficiently in the most efficient manner. But he still was able to make impact in other ways. And he's had postseason mishap after postseason mishap. We can talk about his shortcomings even with the OKC Thunder. In 2012, he was a non-factor in those NBA finals, just went MIA, and that was a huge reason why the Thunder lost the finals. After being traded to Houston, he made postseason run after postseason run, even made it to the conference finals a few times, but they were just those very poor performances. I remember in 2017 against the Kawhi-less San Antonio Spurs, they got blown out by almost 40 points, and James Harden was a non-factor there. 2015 against the Warriors, he had a postseason record for turnovers. That's not getting the job done. In 2018, his MVP season, even with home court in a Game 7, and yes, we could say Chris Paul's absence played a factor in there, but he was one of the members of that team that missed 27 consecutive threes. And going forward, he's built a reputation that, he's a great regular season player, but can he be that player in the postseason? And I got to agree. I'm not really sure if he can really do that. Thankfully, he's not the most necessary piece. Like, this is obviously Joel Embiid's team, but I'm just not sure. And with that, and also with the other pieces that the Sixers have, an inconsistent Tobias Harris. His play has been up and down historically with his tenure with the Sixers. Danny Green has been up and down as a shooter, but is a capable wing defender. But Toronto has been a unit, and people want to say or knock that they don't have a bona fide star or superstar. They're a team, and I really like that they're bringing more of that team basketball back to the NBA. I would say Pascal Siakam has been playing at an all-NBA level since the All-Star break. He had recently had a triple-double towards the end of the regular season, and he's been playing pretty well, honestly. He's been doing his thing, been smart with the ball, getting players involved, and been leading the charge. But they're a lot more than just Pascal. He's definitely worthy of an all-NBA nod, in my opinion. They still have Fred VanVleet, who was actually an all-star in 2022. Rookie Scotty Barnes is my pick personally to be the rookie of the year, and his play has been phenomenal on both ends. And like I said before, they have an array of defenders to put the clamps on the Sixers perimeter players, especially James Harden. They can throw so many bodies at him. The lack of not having Matisse Thybulle for 3 games is going to be definitely a concern. I would say that with those, I'm going to pick the Toronto Raptors to win the series. I would say in 6 games. They would steal possibly a game in Philadelphia, or they would at least be tied 2-2 and possibly steal that game 5. And as the road team, that's all you need. You just have to hold serve in your home court and then steal a game on the road. And that's really how these playoff series work. So I'm going to go with the Toronto Raptors in 6 games. The last game for Saturday's postseason action is going to be the Golden State Warriors hosting the Denver Nuggets. And with a healthy Steph Curry, I would say that the Warriors would probably win this series in 5 games, but his status is up in the air for game 1. His practice has been amping up, and I would say that he is going to be a game time decision for game 1, probably give it a go coming back from that foot sprain. But even with that, compromised Steph Curry, they're going to be getting that chemistry back with Clay, Dre, and Steph for the first time since 2019, and that's pretty crazy that it's been 3 years since those 3 have shared the court at the NBA postseason. Draymond has been missing time as well for various injuries. Clay is coming back from that ACL and Achilles tear. So they haven't really played together consistently in the regular season, but they're going to be doing this on the fly. And the Nuggets pose a threat, absolutely. Jokic is possibly going to be the MVP. To pull up this graphic here, it seems that there's a leak with the MVP ballot voting on Twitter, and with that, it seems that Nikola Jokic is going to be voted the Kia MVP for the 2nd consecutive year, which I gotta say is going to be pretty interesting. I think Joel has had a hell of a season. Giannis Antetokounmpo has had a hell of a season, but yeah, it seems that Jokic could be MVP, but that's, of course, speculation and yet to be confirmed. And he's led them on a great season. I mean, he's done so much for the Nuggets. He's basically broken PER records, been doing it all without them having Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray for the entire season, if not all the season. And they're lucky to even be in here as the 6th seed. And as much as it's a nice story and one player is definitely carrying a team to the postseason, it takes a team effort. And I would say, given that there's still a compromised Steph Curry, I would say that the Warriors win in 6 games, but they do move on, and they'll possibly set up a matchup with the Memphis Grizzlies in the 2nd round. On Sunday's action, it's going to start with the winner of the play-in tournament 8-9 matchup and the Miami Heat. I already predicted that the Atlanta Hawks are going to be representing that 8 spot and playing the Miami Heat. I would say, given that, it's going to pose Miami some trouble for the postseason, especially in the first round matchup. Trae Young is, again, like I said, he's a phenomenal talent. He's going to bring a lot of pressure and put a lot of pressure on the wing defenders for Miami. Obviously, it's not a one-man show. The Atlanta Hawks have some other players capable of helping him out and carrying some of that scoring load as well. Miami has not looked like the juggernaut or your typical number 1 seed. They haven't been playing the best basketball since about March. They've had some turmoil on the sidelines. We all saw that argument between Udonis Haslem, Eric Spoelstra, and Jimmy Butler. Definitely a lot of strong personalities there. You also got to throw in PJ Tucker in there as well. But we'll see how it goes. I would still say that Miami is stable to have enough firepower to get by Atlanta, I would say, in 6 games. The next matchup is going to be the Brooklyn Nets taking on the Boston Celtics, and that's going to be a rematch, actually, of last year's first round series. And the roles are switched this time. Last year, Brooklyn was the 2 and Boston was the 7, so we're going to have a reversal of roles this year. This season, it's been a really weird season for Brooklyn. They've had the Kyrie vaccination issue. They've had James Harden's trade as well, trying to maybe integrate Ben Simmons into the lineup after the trade from Philadelphia. A lot of things going on, but even Kevin Durant being injured for the middle portion of the season. But they seem to have gotten something going towards the tail end of the season, and a lot of analysts, even Vegas, has them as short odds to make the NBA Finals, and I wouldn't discount that. The Celtics have been missing some important defensive prowess, especially with Robert Williams, but they still have Marcus Smart. They have Jaylen Brown as very capable wing defenders to try to slow down guys like KD and Kyrie Irving, but I would definitely see them as a little vulnerable in the 2-7 matchup. It's going to be an exciting series. I would say that Boston still has enough firepower to get by Brooklyn, but I wouldn't say that it's really an upset, really. Of course, the seedings would make it a definition an upset, but with the talent and the roster that Brooklyn has at its disposal, given that they have Kevin Durant, they have Kyrie Irving, that is one of the best duos in NBA right now. Jason Tatum has kind of become the forefront of the Boston Celtics, and I feel like the Celtics have become too reliant on him to provide a huge scoring output. So with that, though, my prediction is going to be that the Boston Celtics move on, and it's going to be the full 7 games. The Bulls are going to be taking on the Milwaukee Bucks in a 3-6 matchup, and we did talk about that briefly in the previous episode, but here again, the Bulls have been on this little downturn. Their play has taken them all the way from once being the top seed in the East to now being the 6th seed, just barely escaping the play-in tournament. Milwaukee's definitely had their number. They're kind of flexing their championship muscles and their championship pedigree, and I think they're already primed and ready for another deep run into the postseason, possibly even to the NBA Finals once again. I would say that Milwaukee, given its regular season dominance over Chicago and the recent play of Chicago, that they'll win this quite comfortably, and it's going to be in 5 games. The last series I'm going to be previewing is the 8-9 winner between the Pelicans and Clippers against the Phoenix Suns, and I would, regardless whoever wins that 8-9 matchup, pick the Phoenix Suns and win it quite comfortably in 5 games. Booker has been pretty great since the All-Star break, despite the absence of Chris Paul, and now Chris Paul is back in the lineup as well. They're going to prove that their appearance in the 2021 finals was no joke. Monty Williams definitely would be my vote for Coach of the Year. I don't see any of the two teams really providing much fight, possibly even could get swept, but I would say that given that I predicted that the Clippers would win, that the Suns would win in 5 games. With the conclusion of the playoff preview, there's still a lot of NBA news that I wanted to get into, starting with the Lakers exit interviews. There were some controversy with the Lakers discussing the news of Frank Vogel being fired or not. There were reports already leaked that he was good as gone by the end of the regular season. Frank Vogel took the podium after their last regular season game against the Nuggets and said that he hasn't heard anything. Definitely made it uncomfortable, and actually has now kind of turned off candidates from coming to the Lakers as they're continuing to show their dysfunction and not looking good for the Lakers in the future. They're going to have to make some massive moves to get back into contention. I wanted to talk about particularly Russell Westbrook. He's been kind of the scapegoat in the entire Lakers ineptitude and lost season in the 2022 NBA season. And I definitely say he definitely deserves a fair good portion of the blame. He just has so many things wrong with his game that just don't translate to the modern NBA. He has never really had a reliable jump shot. I can think he's a career 30% three-point shooter, and I'm talking about low 30s, and this year he actually shot I think even below 30%. His free throw percentage has dipped. He led the league in turnovers this year. There are blooper reels of him losing the ball and bricking shots or airballing shots, or just taking his a patent move of his play, just a transition pull-up jump shot from the elbow, and it hits the backboard. And I don't know if it's his confidence or what, but there just doesn't seem to be any accountability with this play. And, you know, if you see something not working, in my opinion, why keep trying it? Like, we know he's a great driver to the basket. He's a capable passer. Why not do that? Change your game, adapt. But he still wants to show that he can do things. And every time these reporters come and ask him questions about, he gets so angry and combative, and I just don't understand why. He's always been such a very fiery personality. It feels like OKC kind of spoiled him at his time there, where they gave him everything he wanted. They coddled him. They said, okay, yeah, you shot 5 of 19 from the field. So what? You had a triple-double. That's giving us some good looks. They're giving us clicks. That's making people interested in the OKC Thunder. All this other stuff. Even Washington did that. That was only the reason why Washington was even relevant last year, was because Russell Westbrook averaged a triple-double for the 4th time in 5 years. But he has actually devalued the value of a triple-double. When Oscar Robertson did it back in the 60s, that was an astronomical feat. Like, that translated into something, right? With Westbrook, each time he's averaged a triple-double, has he even gotten past the first round? No, not at all. And actually, he's not even come close to the second round. It's not even close. And the one time he did get to the second round was actually only in the bubble and that was James Harden's team. He was the second player, and he was a great second piece there. But here he was essentially the third piece with the Lakers, and there's just all these things that went wrong. And if he doesn't really understand or have that self-awareness, he's going to be in for, unfortunately, a very rude awakening. We saw similar things with Allen Iverson after he was traded from the Denver Nuggets to the Detroit Pistons. He was no one. He was playing in Turkey 2 years later. That's how fast he dipped off. I'm not saying he's like Westbrook should, go play for the Shanghai Sharks in China, but if he doesn't adapt that game, he's going to be out of the league. He is a point guard who doesn't handle the ball well, doesn't shoot free throws well, doesn't shoot jumpers well, turns over the ball. Goes against everything a point guard or the primary ball handler should be doing. So, Russ, not saying you're going to watch this. I could care less. But take a look in the mirror, make some adjustments, evaluate your game, and just make some adjustments. That's all. And hold yourself accountable. That's the biggest thing, regardless. Anybody, if I mess up at work, my boss just wants me to be held accountable. I own up to my mistakes. Russ, do the same. It's not that hard. And maybe take some anger management classes too, but that's just my take. And that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe for more content, and we're going to be coming up with more stuff in the future. Take care.